Sola returned home after 9 years. 9 years without stepping foot in that village, without breathing that red dust, without seeing his mother age. And as he got out of the SUV and walked towards the door of the house where he grew up, he saw something that stopped him dead in his tracks. His mother, standing in the doorway, clutching tightly to a little girl he only knew from blurry photos and short phone calls. His little sister. That's what they'd told him. That's what he'd believed all these years. But the girl looked at him with eyes he knew too well, honey-colored eyes that reflected his own gaze back at him. And in that moment, without understanding why, Sola felt something was amiss. What he didn't know, what his mother had been hiding for 8 years, was that this girl was not his sister. And the truth was about to shatter everything he thought he knew about his family, about his mother, and about himself. This is one of those stories that will hurt you, but not with an empty pain, with the pain of truths someone should have spoken in time and didn't. Because sometimes mothers lie, and sometimes the worst lie is the one told out of love. If you're listening to this from your city, leave us a comment telling us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches your heart, you know what to do. Like and subscribe so we can keep telling stories like this. Now, to understand what happened the day Sola returned, we have to go back to the beginning, to the village, to the dry land, to the day everything began to break. The road to Igboora has no name. It's a red dust road that branches off the highway and disappears among the scrubland hills of Yorubaland, as if the world had forgotten that people still live there. Sola Adebayo drove the rented SUV with the window down, his left arm resting on the sill, his eyes fixed on that line of dust stretching to the horizon. He hadn't put on music. He didn't want to. The silence helped him prepare. 9 years. 9 years without returning to that village. 9 years sending money home every month, calling every 2 or 3 weeks. Always the same questions. How are you, Mama? Did the money arrive? Do you need anything? And always the same answers. We're getting by, my son. Don't worry. He told her he couldn't come back because of work permits, that it was complicated to make the journey again, that he would be there as soon as he could. But the truth was different. Sola didn't come back because he was afraid. Not of the authorities, not of the journey. He was afraid of seeing what he had left behind, afraid of standing at that door and feeling that 9 years had been for nothing, afraid of looking his mother in the eyes and discovering that sending 300,000 a month wasn't the same as being there. But 3 weeks ago, a call changed everything. It wasn't his mother. It was Mama Ngozi, the lifelong neighbor, the woman who knew everything about everyone in the village, who called him at 11 at night in Lagos. Sola, your mama is worse than she tells you. I know you send money and all, but that's not what she needs. She needs you to come. Come before it's too late. Sola hung up. He sat on the edge of the bed in the apartment he shared with 3 other workers in Lagos. He stared at the wall, and for the first time in 9 years, he had no excuse. He requested 2 weeks off work, rented the SUV, made the journey, and now he was here on this dust road that felt longer than he remembered, or perhaps shorter. Who knew? Distances change when you carry 9 years of absence. In the distance, among the hills, the first corrugated iron roof appeared, then another, then the leaning church steeple, as always, as if it too were tired. Igboora. Sola gripped the steering wheel, swallowed hard. I'm just coming to see how she is, he told himself. A few days, and I'll go back. He didn't know those days would change everything. The first thing Sola thought when he saw the house was, I send money every month. How can it be like this? The mud brick walls were cracked with fallen plaster that no one had bothered to pick up. The roof had broken corrugated iron sheets that revealed the rotting wood underneath. The wooden door, the same door his father had made with his own hands when Sola was 10, was swollen with moisture. Badly shut, tied with a wire where there used to be a lock. Sola got out of the SUV and stood there, staring. The rented SUV, gray, new, clean, looked obscene next to that house, like an insult. Inside, he heard movement, a voice, footsteps, and then the door opened. Mama Bola appeared in the doorway, and Sola's breath caught. His mother was 55, but she looked 70. The headscarf couldn't hide her thin, white hair. Her hands, those hands he remembered as strong, that bathed him as a child, that pounded yam at 5 inches the morning. Now they were thin, gnarled, gripping the doorframe as if she needed to hold on not to fall. And her eyes, his mother's eyes, were sunken, tired, in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. My son, Mama Bola said. Nothing more, just that, as if a single word could carry 9 years of waiting. Sola walked towards her, embraced her, and as he held her, He felt her bones, felt her ribs through her blouse, felt how little was left of the body of the woman who had carried him all his life. He swallowed hard to keep from breaking down. "I'm here, Mama." Mama Bola cried silently. She cried like women who learned to cry in silence so as not to scare anyone. And then Sola saw something behind his mother. A little girl standing in the gloom of the hallway, half hidden behind Mama Bola's wrapper, with dark hair falling over her face and wide-open eyes, looking at him like one looks at a stranger entering their home. Sola separated from his mother and smiled. A forced smile. One of those you put on when you don't know what face to make. "Hello, little sister." The girl didn't answer. She took a step back, then another, and before Sola could say anything else, she turned and ran into the house. A door slamming shut was heard. Mama Bola wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "Don't be afraid, my son. Amara is like that with people she doesn't know. Give her time." "People she doesn't know," Sola repeated in a low voice. It hurt him. It hurt him more than he expected, because that phrase meant exactly what it was. To his own sister, he was a stranger, but he said nothing. He swallowed the pain as he had swallowed all the others in the last 9 years. With pride, with silence, he grabbed his suitcase from the SUV and entered the house. Inside, it was worse. The cement floor had cracks running from wall to wall. The kitchen smelled of gas. The old rusty kerosene stove had a leak that no one had repaired. The furniture was the same as when he left, only now it looked like it was about to give up. In the corner, a refrigerator that whirred like a sick animal. Sola looked at everything with a clenched jaw, and instead of feeling guilt, he felt rage, because it was easier. "I send money every month, Mama," he said, putting his suitcase on the floor. "Every single month without fail. Where does it go?" Mama Bola didn't look at him. "Things are expensive, my son, and the child needs things." "What things?" "I send enough." Mama Bola remained silent. She went to the kitchen, put water to boil for coffee. She didn't answer. And Sola, standing in the middle of that living room that smelled of dampness and lost time, had the first feeling that something wasn't right. Not a suspicion yet, no, just a feeling. Like when you dream something, you don't remember, but it leaves you uneasy all day. He peeked down the hallway. Amara's room door was closed. From the other side, total silence. His little sister, 8 years old. He had been 19 when his mother told him on the phone, almost as if casually, "My son, God has blessed me with another daughter." He was speechless. He asked, "How was that possible?" "His mother was 47, Mama Bola replied. "God sends children when he wants, Sola. You don't set the date for him." And he didn't ask anymore. He didn't ask who the father was. He didn't ask about the pregnancy. He didn't ask anything because deep down, it was more comfortable not to know. It was easier to accept the story, send a little more money, and go on with his life in Lagos. Now that decision not to ask was standing on the other side of a closed door with eyes full of fear. Sola turned around, went to the kitchen, drank the coffee his mother served him in a chipped mug, and told himself what he always told himself. "I'm here for a few days. I'll see how my mother is. I'll fix what I can, and I'll go back." He didn't know that was the last time he would think that way. The next morning, Sola went for a walk, not because he wanted to see the village, but rather because the house was suffocating him. The smell of dampness, the whirring of the sick refrigerator, and especially Amara's silence. That child who hadn't spoken a word to him since he arrived, who moved around the house like a scared cat, always clinging to Mama Bola, always far from him. So he went out, and what he saw was worse than the house. Igbo Ora was dying. It wasn't a metaphor. It was literally dying. Half the houses had their doors boarded up, with planks and broken windows. Baba Emeka's shop, where Sola used to buy akara when he was a child, had a rusty padlock and a sign that read "For Sale," with letters the sun had almost completely erased. The primary school was still open, but the basketball court had a backboard without a hoop, and the paint on the walls was peeling. Sola counted the inhabited houses. He stopped counting at 15. When he left, there were families on every corner, children running in the evenings, music on Saturdays. Now, only old people sat at their doors, staring into nothing, and an occasional child walking to school with a torn backpack and oversized shoes. "Everyone left," Sola murmured, more to himself than to anyone. "Not everyone." The voice came from behind. Sola turned around, and there was Baba Femi, sitting on a plastic chair in front of his house with a palm straw hat that looked older than him. His arms crossed and eyes squinted, as if he had been waiting for hours. 74 years old, a widower, his father's old friend. The kind of man who speaks little, but when he does, every word carries weight. "Baba Femi," Sola said, approaching. How have you been? The old man looked him up and down. The clean shirt, the new jeans, the dust-free boots, the rented SUV parked back there, shining under the sun like a mirage. 9 years, young man. Yes, sir. Work kept me away, work. Work, Baba Femi repeated, as if savoring the word. Then he nodded slowly. Your father would be proud. Or not. Sola felt the blow but didn't show it. He straightened up, put his hands in his pockets. I didn't stay here to die like everyone else, Baba Femi. I left to give my mother a better life. The old man didn't answer immediately. He pulled a chewing stick from his shirt pocket and put it in his mouth. He chewed slowly. He looked towards Mama Bola's house in the distance. And did you give it to her? Sola didn't know how to respond because his mother's house was cracked, the roof was falling apart, and his little sister hid under the table every time he entered a room. Baba Femi let the silence hang. Then, as if changing the subject, as if it were just a comment about the weather, he said, That child walks like you, Sola. Exactly like you, with your feet turned slightly inward. Just like you walked as a boy. Sola laughed, a short, nervous laugh. She's my sister, Baba Femi. We must resemble each other somewhat. The old man said nothing more, just adjusted his hat and closed his eyes as if the matter was concluded, or as if he had just planted a seed and was willing to wait however long it took to see it grow. Sola said goodbye and walked back to the house. The phrase echoed in his head, he didn't know why. Your same way of walking. When he arrived, he found Amara in the kitchen, sitting on the floor, drawing with worn crayons on a notebook page. Sola approached slowly, knelt down, tried to see what she was drawing. Hello, Amara. What are you drawing? The girl looked up, stared at him for a second with those huge, frightened eyes, and scurried under the table, clutching the drawing to her chest as if protecting a treasure. Sola remained squatting, alone, looking at the empty space where she had been, and he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, the feeling of being superfluous in a place that was supposed to be his. That night, Sola couldn't sleep. He had been given the back room, his old room from when he was a teenager, but nothing of his remained. The walls were bare. The bed was a mattress on a wooden frame that creaked every time he breathed. And through the curtainless window, a Nigerian moon, so white it seemed unreal, shone in. He got up at 11, went for water in the kitchen, and as he passed Mama Bola's room, he heard something that stopped him. His mother was singing to Amara, an old song, one Sola knew, the same one Mama Bola used to sing to him when he was a child and was afraid of thunder. The same melody, the same voice, only now the voice was broken, worn, like a record that had been played too many times. Sola stood in the hallway, in the darkness, listening. He didn't go in, didn't move. Through the slightly open door, he saw the scene. Mama Bola sat on the edge of the bed, stroking Amara's hair, whose eyes were already closed. The light from a small lamp cast a golden glow on both of them, like an old photograph. And then Amara moved, turned her head on the pillow, and the lamplight fell directly on her face. Sola saw her eyes, they were closed, but he saw them all the same because he had seen them all day. Honey-colored eyes, large, with long eyelashes, and that slightly almond shape he saw every morning in the bathroom mirror in Lagos. He felt something cold in his stomach. It wasn't a thought, it was prior to thought. It was his body recognizing something, his mind still refused to name. He moved away from the door, breathed. They are siblings, he told himself. It's normal to look alike. He went to the kitchen, poured himself water, and there, standing in the darkness, glass in hand, he decided to confront what he had been avoiding all day. He went to his mother's room. Mama Bola had already left Amara's room. She was sitting on her own bed, taking a pill with a sip of water. Seeing him enter, she quickly hid the bottle under the pillow, but she wasn't fast enough. Mama, tell me, my son, why didn't you tell me you were sick? Mama Bola froze. Then she did what she always did when she didn't want to talk. She smiled. It's nothing, Sola, just old age. One gets old, and the body starts to take its toll. Mama Ngozi called me in Lagos at 11 at night to tell me to come before it was too late. That doesn't sound like old age, Mama. Mama Bola stopped smiling. Ngozi talks too much. She always has. What's wrong with you? Nothing that can't be fixed, my son. Just leave it. I'm fine. You came to rest. I didn't come to rest. I came because I was told you are dying, and you hadn't told me. The word dying hung between them like a slap. Mama Bola lowered her gaze. She was silent for a long while. When she spoke, her voice was smaller. I'm not dying, but I'm not well either. She said no more. Sola looked at her, waiting. She didn't continue. Another door closing. Sola left the room without saying goodnight. He went to the bathroom, Opened the medicine cabinet. 7 bottles. He counted them one by one. Pills for blood pressure, pills for kidneys, a diuretic, a gastric protector, something he couldn't identify with a long, difficult name, another almost empty bottle, and one more that still had the pharmacy label with the price. 5,000. 5,000 for a single bottle. Sola picked up that bottle and turned it in his hand. He looked at the date. It had been prescribed 2 months ago, and the money he sent, the 300,000 monthly that he thought was enough for a woman and a child in a village where almost nothing is spent, suddenly seemed a ridiculous amount. He put the bottle back, closed the cabinet, looked at himself in the mirror. There were the honey-colored eyes, the same ones he had seen 10 minutes ago on the face of an 8-year-old girl. And she's your sister, he repeated to himself. Stop thinking nonsense. But the face in the mirror didn't seem convinced. He went to sleep. He didn't sleep. He lay on his back, staring at the rotting wooden ceiling, listening to the crickets, thinking about medicine bottles, honey-colored eyes, and all the questions he hadn't asked in 9 years. Outside, the village was silent, but inside that house, something was beginning to make noise. On the 3rd day, Sola got tired of just looking. He got up early, before Mama Bola lit the kerosene stove, and went to the backyard to look for what was left of his father's tools. He found a hammer with a loose handle, some rusty nails, a wooden ladder with 2 broken rungs, and a roll of wire. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start. He climbed onto the roof. From up there, the village looked even worse. The neighboring roofs were just as bad as his mother's. Broken corrugated iron sheets, tarpaulins tied down with stones, pieces of cardboard where mud should have been. But Sola wasn't looking at the neighboring roofs. He was looking at Mama Bola's roof and counting the sheets that needed changing. 14 broken sheets, some with holes where water entered every rainy season. And beneath the sheets the wood was black, rotting, soft to the touch. That couldn't be fixed with nails. That needed new beams, materials, someone who knew. Sola knew about construction. It was his job in Lagos. But there he worked with concrete, with steel, with cranes. Here there was none of that. Here it was mud brick and willpower. He began to remove the broken sheets one by one. Below, the kitchen door opened. Mama Bola came out with a glass of lime water and left it on the ground at the foot of the ladder. Without saying anything, she went back inside. A few minutes later, Sola noticed something. Amara was in the corner of the yard, sitting on an overturned bucket, watching him. She didn't hide, she didn't run. She just sat there with her knees together and arms crossed, observing him work with the same attention with which she looked at her own drawings. Sola didn't say anything to her. He was afraid that if he greeted her, she would leave, so he kept working, pretending not to see her, and she stayed. It was the first time they shared the same space without a door closing between them. Mid-morning, Sola came down from the roof and entered the kitchen. Mama Bola was sorting beans at the table. "Mama, I need you to tell me something, and to tell me the truth." Mama Bola looked at him, without releasing the beans. "The money I send you every month, is it enough or not?" Mama Bola took a moment to answer. She picked out a bad bean, set it aside. "It's enough, my son. I'm not asking just to ask. I saw the medicine bottles, 7 of them. I saw the price of one, 5,000. That's just one bottle. How much do you spend a month on medicine?" Silence. "How much, Mama?" "Around 50,000, Mama Bola said quietly. "Sometimes more." Sola did the math in his head. He sent 300,000 a month. If 50,000 went to medicine, that left 250,000 for everything else. Food, electricity, gas, water, Amara's school, clothes, whatever broke. And Amara, her school supplies. Mama Bola didn't answer. "Mama, sometimes it wasn't enough for school supplies," Mama Bola said without looking at him. "But the teacher lent her some, and Mama Ngozi gave her last year's backpack." Sola fell silent. Mama Ngozi, the neighbor, gave his sister backpacks because the money he sent from Lagos wasn't enough, even for notebooks. "You borrowed from Mama Ngozi?" Mama Bola nodded slowly. "How much?" 20,000. For last year's enrollment fees. Sola leaned against the wall. He looked at the kitchen ceiling, the same damp stains as always, only larger. He looked at the kerosene stove with the gas leak. He looked at the refrigerator that sounded like a broken engine. "I send you money every month," he said. But this time the phrase didn't sound like before. It didn't sound like pride. It sounded like an excuse. Because there, standing in that kitchen that smelled of beans and gas, Sola understood something he had been avoiding for 9 years. 300,000 a month was not enough. It had never been enough. And all the pride he felt for sending that money, all the I do my part. I don't fail them. He repeated to himself every time he made the transfer. Was a lie he told himself so he wouldn't feel that he had abandoned his mother. The money arrived. Sola didn't. And the difference between the two was painted in every crack of that house. That afternoon, while Mama Bola took her nap, Sola was alone in the living room. The house was silent. The kind of heavy silence that village houses have after eating, when the heat crushes everything and even the dogs lie down in the shade. Sola was sitting on the plastic chair by the door, drinking cold coffee, when he heard a small noise, like the scraping of a crayon against paper. It came from Amara's room. He got up slowly, walked down the hallway. The door was ajar. Amara was sitting on the floor, barefoot, legs crossed, back against the bed. She had a box of worn crayons by her side. Most were stubs, tiny pieces of color barely graspable with fingers, and she was drawing on a notebook page with a concentration Sola hadn't seen in her before. But what caught his attention wasn't the child. It was the walls. Amara's room had its walls covered in drawings, scenes, taped up with old adhesive tape, some with curled corners, others already yellowed by the sun coming through the window. Sola scanned them, one by one. All depicted the same thing. A mud brick house with a corrugated iron roof, an old woman standing at the door, always the same woman, always with a headscarf, and a man. The man was far away, always far away. In some drawings, he was on the other side of the page, separated from the house by a thick line that divided it in two. In others, he was even further away, almost in the corner, almost falling off the paper. In one, the line separating him had something written above it in a child's shaky hand. The Great Divide. In another drawing, a more recent one with livelier colors, the man wasn't on the other side of the line. He was on the roof. Sola stood staring at that drawing. The man on the house's roof with a hammer in his hand, and the old woman below, and a smaller child looking up. She had drawn it today. After seeing him work, Sola pushed the door open slowly. Amara looked up, saw him, didn't move. "Can I see?" Sola asked, pointing to the walls. Amara shrugged. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. To her, that was almost an invitation. Sola entered the room and sat on the floor a meter away, far enough not to scare her, close enough to see the drawings on the page in her hands. "Who is this?" he asked, pointing to the man on the roof. Amara looked at him for a moment, then at the drawing, then back at him, as if deciding if she could trust him. "My brother," she said. Her voice came out small, as if she wasn't used to using it with him. "Mama says he's far away helping us." Sola nodded, smiled slightly. "And this one here?" He pointed to another drawing on the wall, the one of the man across the divide. "Also my brother, but from before when he was further away." Sola looked at the drawings again. All told the same story. A man who left, a woman who stayed, and a child who drew the distance because she didn't know how to draw absence. Silence settled between them, but it was no longer the uncomfortable silence of previous days. It was softer, something that resembled the beginning of trust. Amara resumed drawing. Sola remained seated, without speaking, without moving, just accompanying her. And for a while, that was enough. Until Amara spoke again. She didn't look at him when she said it. She kept drawing, running the blue crayon over the sky of her picture, as if what she was about to say was the same as talking about the weather or food. "My mama also says my papa left." Sola felt the air stop. "She says he went far away, but that someday he would come back." Amara kept coloring, didn't lift her head, didn't expect an answer. For her, that was simply the truth she had been told. Another one of those things adults say, and children accept, because they have nothing to compare it to. But Sola didn't move. He remained seated on the floor of that room full of drawings, his mouth slightly open and a pressure in his chest he didn't know where it came from. It wasn't pain, it wasn't sadness. It was something deeper, older, like a broken bone that never healed properly and suddenly aches in the cold. "Your papa?" he managed to say. Amara nodded without stopping drawing. "And your mama told you his name?" "No, just that he left." Sola swallowed. He wanted to ask more. He wanted to ask who Amara's father was, because until that moment, in 9 years, he had never asked Mama Bola. Never. He had accepted the story that his mother had another daughter at 47 and had not asked a single question about the father. Not one. Why? Because he didn't want to know. Because knowing would have meant thinking of his mother with another man. It meant complications. It meant questions that led to more questions. And Sola, since he was 19, had chosen the simplest version of everything. Send money, do my part, don't ask. But now he was sitting on the floor of an 8-year-old girl's room, who was drawing a father who left, and something inside him Something that wasn't thought, that was older than thought. It was screaming at him to pay attention, to look closely. Amara finished the sky of her drawing, lifted it with both hands, and showed it to him. Look, this is you. It was the man on the roof with a hammer, and below, a girl looking at him. Sola took the drawing, held it carefully as if it were fragile. It's very beautiful, he said. And his voice came out broken. He didn't know why. Amara smiled, barely a small, shy smile, like a door opening a centimeter. And for the first time since Sola had arrived in Igboora, the girl didn't leave. She stayed there beside him, drawing, and he stayed too, without speaking, without yet understanding what was happening, but feeling it in a place that has no name. The next day, Sola overheard something he shouldn't have. It was by accident. He had gone out to the yard to check the ladder. A rung had broken the day before while he was working on the roof, and he was crouched by the kitchen wall when he heard voices. Mama Ngozi had arrived early. Sola had known her all his life. 55 years old. Strong voice, hands always busy, opinions on everything and everyone. The kind of woman who knows what's happening in every house in the village before it happens, but also the kind of woman who lends you 20,000 without asking, and gives your daughter a backpack when you can't afford one. Sola couldn't see, but he heard them clearly, through the open kitchen window. Mama Ngozi was speaking in a low voice. That was already strange. Mama Ngozi never spoke in a low voice. Tell him the truth, Bola, he's here now. How much longer are you going to wait? Be quiet, Ngozi, lower your voice. Lower my voice? I've been quiet for years, Bola, and you're still doing the same thing. That boy will find out from someone else, and he'll hate you, and that day it will be too late. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I understand you're afraid, but fear won't save you from this. Silence. Then Mama Bola, her voice breaking. It's not that easy, Ngozi. I can't just come out and tell him like that. And when will it be easy? When you die? When you can no longer speak? Another longer silence. Sola remained motionless against the wall with the ladder in his hands and his heart pounding. He didn't breathe. He didn't want to make a sound. He wanted to keep listening. But at the same time, something inside him told him he didn't want to know what came after those words. He straightened up, leaned the ladder against the wall, and entered the kitchen through the back door. The two women instantly fell silent. Mama Ngozi had a cup of coffee in her hand. Mama Bola was turned away, washing a plate that was probably already clean. Sola looked at both of them. What truth? Mama Ngozi lowered her gaze. Mama Bola continued washing the plate. What were you talking about? Mama Bola turned off the water tap. She slowly dried her hands with a cloth. She turned around. Nothing, my son. Ngozi was talking about debts. You know how she is. I wasn't talking about debts, Mama Ngozi said, looking at Mama Bola with a hardness Sola had never seen. Ngozi. Mama Bola's voice was like a knife. A single word spoken with the force of a command. Mama Ngozi pressed her lips together, took a sip of coffee, said nothing more. Sola looked at one, then the other. The silence in the kitchen weighed more than any words. He knew they were lying to him. He knew what he had heard had nothing to do with debts, but he also knew that if he pushed at that moment, both would clam up, and he wouldn't get anything. So he did what he always did. He swallowed the question. All right, he said. He turned and left. But before crossing the door, he glanced back at his mother. Her hands were trembling, both hands, and the plate she had been washing was on the floor, broken into 3 pieces. That same afternoon, Sola entered his mother's room looking for a screwdriver. Mama Bola had gone to the shop with Amara. The house was empty. Sola needed to tighten the hinge screws on the main door, the door his father had made with his hands, and he remembered his mother kept old tools somewhere in the room. He checked the closet. Nothing useful. He checked on top of the wardrobe. Dust and empty boxes. He bent down to look under the bed, and there it was. It wasn't a toolbox. It was an old shoe box with crushed corners and a thick rubber band around it to keep it closed. It was pushed all the way to the back, against the wall, as if someone had intentionally hidden it there. Sola pulled it out, placed it on the bed, and stared at it for a moment. He knew he shouldn't open it. He knew whatever was inside was private, belonged to his mother, was none of his business. He opened it. The first thing he saw was a photo. A printed photo like those taken in village photography studios with a blue background and an oval frame. A young woman, about 17 or 18, with long dark hair, eyes lined with kohl, a smile that was half defiance and half sadness. Sola recognized her immediately. Neka Okoro. The photo hit him in the stomach like a punch, because he hadn't thought of her in years. He had buried that name, that face, that story somewhere deep where it couldn't bother him. And now there she was, looking at him from an old photo in a shoebox under his mother's bed. Neka, his teenage girlfriend, his first everything, the girl he had grown up with, running among the hills, the one who taught him to kiss behind the church, the one who cried in secret because her father beat her and her mother had left. The impulsive, beautiful, angry at the world girl who looked at him with eyes full of rage the night before. He left for Lagos and said, "If you go, don't come back." And he went. And he didn't come back. Sola set the photo aside, his hands trembling. The second thing he took out was a newborn hospital bracelet, small, white plastic, with letters printed in blue ink that time had faded but were still legible. Amara, 3.2 kilogram, Ogbomosho General Hospital. Sola held it between his fingers, turned it, read it again. Amara's birth bracelet, his little sister's. Why did his mother have it kept in a box with a photo of Neka? The third thing was worse. It was a document folded into 3 parts, with an official seal and yellowed paper. Amara's birth certificate. Sola unfolded it slowly. Name: Amara Adebayo Okoro. He stopped at the surname. He reread it. Adebayo Okoro. Adebayo, his surname. Okoro, Neka's surname. Father's name, blank. Mother's name, Neka Okoro. Sola stared at the paper. His brain worked slowly like an old machine someone starts after years. Neka Okoro. Adebayo. Amara Adebayo Okoro. Mother Neka. Father blank. But the paternal surname, Adebayo. Why does she have my surname? He said aloud, to no one. If she's my mother's child with another man, why does she have my surname? Because Amara's maternal surname should be Bola, Mama Bola's maiden name, not Adebayo. Adebayo was Sola's surname, Sola's father's surname, the Adebayo men's surname, unless Amara was not Mama Bola's daughter. Unless Amara was an Adebayo's daughter. Sola dropped the certificate. His fingers burned as if the paper was hot, and then he saw the last thing in the box. A handwritten letter on a lined notebook page, in Mama Bola's careful, trembling hand, folded, never put in an envelope, never sent. At the top it said, "For Sola." He opened it. "My son, there's something I should have told you a long time ago. I don't know how to start because I don't know how to say this without you hating me, but I can't keep silent any longer. Amara is not." The sentence was incomplete. After Amara is not, there was an ink stain, as if the pen had pressed against the paper for too long, as if Mama Bola had written those 3 words and then frozen, unable to finish the sentence that changed everything. Amara is not. Amara is not what? Not your sister, not my daughter, not who you think she is? Sola sat on his mother's bed with the letter in one hand and the certificate in the other. Nika's photo looked at him from the pillow. The hospital bracelet gleamed under the window light, and everything he had believed for 9 years. The little sister, the money he sent, the short calls, the "God blessed me with another daughter," the questions he never asked. Everything began to tremble, like a mud brick house in an earthquake. He didn't yet know the full truth, but he already knew that the story he had been told was a lie, and that the truth was inside that house, walking barefoot, drawing with worn crayons, and looking at him with his very own eyes. Outside, he heard footsteps. Mama Bola and Amara were returning from the shop. Sola put everything back in the box, closed it, pushed it under the bed, wiped his face, stood up, left the room, and when Mama Bola entered through the door with a market bag in one hand and Amara by the other, Sola looked at her in a way he had never looked at her before. Mama Bola noticed and lowered her eyes. Sola waited for Amara to fall asleep. He waited, sitting on the plastic chair in the living room in the darkness, without turning on the light, listening to the sounds of the house. Mama Bola putting Amara to bed, the usual song, his mother's footsteps going to the bathroom, the sound of water, and then the silence that meant the child was asleep. Then he got up, went to his mother's room, didn't knock, opened the door. Mama Bola was sitting on the edge of the bed, taking her nightly pills. Seeing him enter like that, without warning, with that face, she put the glass of water on the nightstand and remained very still, like an animal that knows something is coming. Sola pulled the shoebox from under the bed, placed it on the mattress between them, removed the rubber band, opened it, took out Nika's photo, and placed it in front of his mother. "Why do you have a photo of Neka Okoro in your room?" Mama Bola looked at the photo. The blood drained from her face. That girl was an acquaintance. She asked me for help when... An acquaintance whose daughter was born in Ogbomosho General Hospital with the name Amara. Sola pulled out the hospital bracelet, placed it next to the photo. My son, let me explain. I'm not finished yet. Sola took out the birth certificate, unfolded it, placed it on the bed like a lawyer presenting evidence. He pointed with his finger. Amara Adebayo Okoro, mother. Neka Okoro, father. Blank. But the paternal surname is Adebayo. He paused. Adebayo, Mama. Not Bola, not your maiden name but mine. Mama Bola opened her mouth. Nothing came out. And this? Sola took out the letter, the folded notebook page in his mother's handwriting addressed to him, held it in front of Mama Bola's eyes. You wrote this, my son. There's something I should have told you a long time ago. Amara is not. And it cuts off there. Amara is not what, Mama? Sola. Amara is not what? Mama Bola began to cry. Not the silent weeping from when he arrived. A raw, ugly cry that came from the depths of her stomach, twisting her face and shaking her whole body. My son, please. It's not what you think. Then what is it? Because what I think is that you've been lying to me for 9 years. What I think is that my little sister is not my little sister. What I think is that Neka Okoro has something to do with that child. And you've hidden it from me since she was born. Neka needed help. She came here pregnant, and I took her in because… Who is Amara's father? The question fell on the room like a gunshot. Mama Bola covered her mouth with both hands. She closed her eyes. Tears ran between her fingers. Her whole body trembled. Tell me, who is Amara's father? Sola shouted. He shouted louder than he intended. He shouted like he hadn't shouted since he was 15 and saw his father's body covered with a tarpaulin at the construction site where he fell from the scaffolding. And from the other side of the wall, Amara began to cry. A frightened child's cry. Small at first, then louder. The kind of cry a child makes when they don't understand what's happening but know something is very wrong. Mama Bola suddenly stood up, looked towards the wall, looked at Sola, and in her eyes appeared something that was neither sadness nor guilt. It was ferocity. The ferocity of a mother protecting her young. Not in front of the child, she said, and her voice no longer trembled. Whatever you have to ask me, but not like this, not shouting, not with her on the other side listening. Sola stood with his hands open on the bed, among the photo and the certificate and the letter and the bracelet, breathing heavily, his jaw clenched so tight his teeth hurt. From the other side of the wall, Amara kept crying. Sola closed his eyes, clenched his fists, slammed his open palm on the nightstand. The glass of water fell to the floor and broke. He left the room without saying anything, crossed the living room, opened the front door. Outside, the air of Yorubaland was cold and dry. The stars looked as they don't in Lagos. Thousands, millions, so close they seemed like dust sprinkled on a black roof. Sola sat on the stoop, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. In one hand, he still held the crumpled birth certificate. Amara Adebayo Okoro, Adebayo. Inside the house, the child's crying slowly faded. Mama Bola was singing to her again. The same song, always the same song. And Sola, sitting outside like a stranger in his own home, thought that song no longer sounded the same. It no longer sounded like a lullaby. It sounded like an apology. Sola didn't sleep that night. He stayed in the living room, lying on the old armchair, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house's breathing. Mama Bola didn't leave her room. Amara didn't either. The silence was thick, like mud. At 6 inches the morning, when the sky was just beginning to turn gray, Sola put on his boots and went out. He didn't know where he was going. He just walked. He passed the clothes shop, past the empty school, past Baba Femi's house, who was still asleep, and without thinking, without deciding, he ended up in front of the church. The church of Igbo Ora was the only building in the village that still stood with some dignity. The walls were whitewashed, the door was thick wood, and inside it smelled of wax, incense, and many years. The door was open. Sola entered. Pastor David was at the back, arranging the candles on the altar. 72 years old, worn attire, large, farmer's hands that ended up becoming a pastor's. He had baptized Sola, buried his father. He had baptized Amara. He had been in that village for 40 years, and in 40 years, a village pastor learns everything. So early, and you're already walking, the pastor said, without turning around. Looks like you didn't sleep. I didn't sleep. It shows. David finished arranging the candles. He wiped his hands on his attire. He looked at him. Do you want to talk, or do you want to pray? Neither. Then I offer you a third option. The pastor walked towards the vestry, a small room behind the altar with a wooden desk, a chair, a crucifix, and a shelf with old books. From a drawer, he took out an unlabeled bottle of palm wine and 2 calabash cups. He poured both, gave one to Sola, and sat down. "This isn't confession," David said, raising his cup. "This is between men." Sola drank the palm wine in one gulp. It burned his throat. He felt the warmth go down to his stomach. He gripped the cup with both hands. "Pastor, you know everyone in this village. To my misfortune, you know things others don't know. To my greater misfortune. Then I'm going to ask you a question, and I ask you not to lie to me, because I'm tired of being lied to in that house." The pastor looked at him without blinking. He took a sip of palm wine, waited. "Do you know who Amara's father is?" The silence that followed was long. The kind of silence that has weight, that takes up space, that pushes you against the chair. Pastor David placed the cup on the desk, leaned back, looked at the crucifix on the wall as if asking permission or asking for forgiveness. "There are things I've been told in council, Sola, and those things I cannot repeat to you or anyone. I'm not asking you to tell me what my mother confessed to you. I'm asking you to tell me the truth. Sometimes they are the same thing." Pastor David sighed, ran a hand over his face, and when he spoke, he did so slowly, choosing each word, like someone walking through a minefield. "I cannot tell you what you want me to tell you. It is not my place. That has to come from your mother, not from me." He paused. "But what I can tell you is this. There are decisions a mother makes in one night and carries for a lifetime. Your mother is not bad, Sola. Your mother was afraid. And fear, when mixed with love, does terrible things." Sola clenched his jaw. "That tells me nothing. It tells you everything. You just don't want to see it yet. Then help me see." The pastor poured himself another palm wine, drank it slowly, then looked at Sola with an intensity that reminded him of Baba Femi. That look of the old men of the village, who don't need many words, because the few they say weigh tons. "I will only tell you one thing, young man. Look at that child. Look at her well, not with the eyes of a brother. Look at her with clean eyes, as if you were seeing her for the first time." Another pause. "God does not put the answers in books, Sola. He puts them in faces." Sola froze. He puts them in faces. The honey-colored eyes. The way she walks with her feet turned slightly inward. The way she frowns when she concentrates on a drawing. Her nose, her mouth. Everything he had been seeing since he arrived and that his head had refused to name. He got up from the chair without saying anything, left the cup on the desk, walked towards the door. "Sola," the pastor called. He stopped without turning around. "Don't be hard on your mother. She has been hard enough on herself all these years, more than you can imagine." Sola left the church. The morning sun hid his face. He walked down the dust road back to the house, with the pastor's words echoing in his head like stones in a bucket. He puts them in faces. He already knew, somewhere inside him. He already knew from the first day, from the moment he got out of the SUV and saw that child clinging to his mother, with eyes that were his own. But knowing something and accepting it are two different things. And Sola was not yet ready for the second. Sola didn't know what time it was when something woke him. He hadn't slept well for 2 nights. He had stayed on the armchair again, fully clothed with his boots beside him, tossing and turning until exhaustion took over. But something jolted him awake. A small noise, like the sound of a door opening slowly when someone doesn't want to be heard. He stayed still. He heard light footsteps, barefoot on the cement floor. Then the front door, the creak of swollen wood, and then nothing. Sola sat up abruptly, looked towards the hallway. Amara's room door was open, the bed empty. "Mama!" Mama Bola came out of her room in seconds, eyes swollen and nightgown wrinkled. "What's wrong? Amara?" "She's gone." Mama Bola looked at the empty bed, put her hands to her mouth, and Sola saw something in his mother's eyes that he hadn't seen when he shouted, nor when he showed her the box, nor when he demanded the truth. He saw pure terror. "My God, no, no, no." Mama Bola ran towards the door. Sola stopped her. "Wait. Don't go out like that. I'll go. She's my child. Mama, you can't run. I'll go. Stay here in case she comes back." Mama Bola looked at him with tear-filled eyes, and for a moment, Sola saw in his mother not the woman who had lied to him for 9 years, but the woman who had single-handedly raised a child who wasn't hers, who had sung to her every night, who had given her every naira he sent, and was left with nothing. The woman who was sick and terrified, because the only thing that mattered to her in the world had walked out that door, into the darkness. "I'll find her," Sola said. "I promise you." He put on his boots, went out. Outside, there was no moon. The village was black. The dust roads disappeared into the shadows of the abandoned houses. And the only point of light was a yellow bulb at the corner of Baba Emeka's shop, which no one had turned off in years. "Amara!" Sola shouted. His voice vanished among the hills and didn't return. Amara! Nothing. He walked quickly towards the empty plaza, towards the closed school. He knocked on Baba Femi's door. The old man opened it in a minute, his hat on as if he slept with it. The child left the house, Sola said. I can't find her. Baba Femi asked nothing. He grabbed a lantern. He went out. Did you check the stream? No. Go to the stream. I'll go to the cemetery. They separated. Sola ran towards the dry stream south of the village. He searched it from end to end, illuminating it with his phone. Nothing. Stones, trash, silence. And then he heard Baba Femi's distant voice from the hill. She's here. She's up here. Sola ran. He climbed the dust path leading to the cemetery. His legs burned. His heart pounded against his ribs. He reached the entrance, an old iron gate that they never closed, because who would steal from a village cemetery? And there, among the wooden crosses and chipped concrete graves, he saw the light of Baba Femi's lantern pointing towards a grave in the second row. Amara was sitting on the ground, legs crossed, barefoot, her white nightgown dirty with earth. She was hugging her knees and had her face hidden in her arms. She was sitting next to the grave of Ignatius Adebayo, the grandfather she never knew, the man Mama Bola talked about every night. Your grandfather is watching over you from heaven, Amara. He was good, he was strong, his name was Ignatius. The child had come to look for him. Baba Femi stood 2 meters away, not approaching, his lantern low. He looked at Sola when he arrived. He said nothing, but in his eyes was something Sola couldn't decipher at that moment. Sola approached slowly. He knelt down. Amara. The girl lifted her face. Her eyes were red, her cheeks wet, and her nose was running. Why are you all fighting over me? She said. Her voice came out broken like wet paper. Did I do something wrong? Sola felt something burst inside him, something nameless, something that existed before pride, before rage, before all the questions about certificates and surnames and lies. Something only a human being can feel when a child asks if they are guilty of a pain that doesn't belong to them. No, Amara, you didn't do anything wrong. Then why were you shouting? Because sometimes adults are foolish, but it has nothing to do with you. Amara looked at him. She looked at him for a long time, with those honey-colored eyes shining under the lantern's light, and then she did something she hadn't done since Sola arrived in the village. She stretched out her arms. Sola picked her up. The girl clung to his neck with both hands and hid her face on his shoulder. She weighed so little, was so small, and was trembling. Sola held her tightly against his chest and walked carefully down the hill in the darkness, careful not to stumble. Baba Femi walked ahead with the lantern, lighting the way without saying a word. Halfway down, Amara fell asleep. Her breathing became slow and soft against Sola's neck, and he felt something he had never felt before. Not in Lagos, not at the construction site, nowhere. A weight in his arms that wasn't a burden. It was something else. When they arrived home, Mama Bola was waiting for them at the door, crying. Sola gently handed Amara to her. Mama Bola received her, hugged her, carried her inside. Baba Femi said goodbye with a nod and walked away into the darkness. Sola waited for Mama Bola to put the child to bed, waited for her to sing the song, waited for her to come out of the room and close the door. Then, he looked at her. Now you're going to tell me everything. And this time Mama Bola didn't shut down, didn't avert her gaze, didn't lie. She sat at the kitchen table with her hands clasped in front of her, and for the first time in 8 years, she opened her mouth to tell the truth. Mama Bola spoke slowly, like someone disarming a bomb with her hands, careful with every word, every pause, because she knew any misplaced phrase could blow everything to pieces. Sola sat opposite her across the table. He didn't interrupt her, didn't look at her with rage. He looked at her with something worse, with the icy patience of someone who already knows what's coming will hurt, and just wants to know how much. Mama Bola started from the beginning. Neka and you, I knew. The whole village knew. You truly loved each other, even though you were just children who knew nothing about life. Pause. The night before you left for the city, she came to the house. I pretended to be asleep. I heard you both in the yard. Sola clenched his fists under the table. He didn't want that detail, but he didn't stop her. When you left, Neka didn't know she was pregnant. She found out weeks later. She didn't tell you. Out of pride. Out of anger. I don't know. But she didn't tell you. And you? You knew? No. Not then. I found out later when she arrived here. Mama Bola closed her eyes, squeezed her hands together. She arrived 7 months pregnant. Sola, thin, dirty, with a black eye. She knocked on the door one December night. I opened it and saw her standing there with her huge belly, and the face of someone who had nowhere else to go. Mama Bola told him how she took her in, how she cared for her, how Amara was born in Ogbomosho General Hospital. One February dawn, with eyes wide open from the first minute, as if looking for something. When I saw her, Sola, when I saw that child, I knew she was yours because she looked at me with your eyes. She recounted the first year. Neka, staying in the house, trying to be a mother, the good days and the bad, the months when it seemed to work, and then the collapse. Neka going out at night, coming back drunk, bringing men who looked at the child in a way that chilled Mama Bola's blood. I told her, Neka, those men cannot be near the child. And she screamed at me. She told me Amara wasn't my child, not to interfere. Then came the threat. One day she told me, if you tell Sola anything, I'll go and destroy his life there. I'll tell everyone he abandoned me pregnant. I'll send people to look for him. I'll ruin everything. And I believed her, Sola. I believed her because that girl had a rage inside her that was frightening. And then she left. Mama Bola was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. She left one morning. She didn't say goodbye, left no note. She left and never came back. Amara was 1.5 years old. She cried for 3 nights straight calling for her. Then she stopped calling. Sola swallowed hard. He felt a knot in his throat the size of the village. And why didn't you tell me, Mama? Why didn't you call me that day and tell me the truth? Mama Bola looked at him with tear-filled eyes. Because at first, I thought it would be for a short time. I thought Neka would come back, that the situation would resolve itself, that I would find the right moment to tell you. And then you started sending more money. You told me you had a promotion at work, that you were doing well, that things were finally looking up. Mama Bola wiped her eyes with her sleeve. How could I tell you then? How could I call you to say, come back, leave everything? The girl left you a daughter and disappeared. That's what I should have done. I know, but I couldn't. And the next year, and the next, by the following year, Amara was already calling me Mama. Mama Bola pressed her lips together. She was already calling me Mama, Sola. How do you take that away from a 3-year-old child? How do you tell her that the woman who cares for her isn't her mother, and that her father is 2,000 kilometers away without knowing she exists? Sola didn't answer, because he had no answer for that. And then I didn't know how to tell you without losing you. It was no longer a 1-year secret. It was 3, then 5, then 7. Each year that passed, the lie grew, and I couldn't escape it anymore. It was like being buried alive. Mama Bola pulled a handkerchief from her pocket, blew her nose, her whole body was trembling. I tried to write to you. I started that letter 100 times. 100 times. Sola. And I could never finish it, because I couldn't find the words. Because every time I wrote, Amara is not your sister, I felt like the world was ending. And then Mama Bola said what shattered him. She said it slowly, looking him in the eyes, as if she had waited 8 years to return that phrase. Do you remember when you called me about 5 years ago? Amara was 3. You asked me how the child was, and I told you she was growing up beautifully, and you told me. Sola felt the cold before she finished the sentence, because he did remember. He remembered perfectly. You told me, take good care of her, Mama. At least she will grow up with you. Silence. You were talking about your daughter, Sola, your own daughter, and you didn't even know it. Sola remained motionless. The phrase entered him like a knife made of ice, slowly, silently, but reaching a place where pain cannot be named. Take good care of her, Mama. He had said that, speaking of his little sister, without knowing he was speaking of his daughter, without knowing that every naira he sent was for a child who carried his blood, his eyes, his surname, without knowing that while he slept alone in an apartment in Lagos, 2,000 kilometers away, there was a child who drew a man far away and called her own father, my brother. Mama Bola took a deep breath. She straightened up slightly. I'm sick, Sola. My kidneys are failing. I need treatment in the city, and I don't know how much time I have left. Her voice broke. If I die without having told you the truth, Amara will be alone in the world, without a father, without a mother, without anyone. I couldn't let that happen. That's why I told Ngozi to call you. That's why you're here. Mama Bola slid from the chair, fell to her knees on the kitchen floor, not as a dramatic gesture, but like someone who can no longer bear the weight of what she carries. Forgive me, my son. Forgive me. Sola remained seated, looking at his mother on her knees, looking at the empty table between them, looking at the closed door of the room where Amara slept, knowing nothing. He didn't shout, he didn't hit anything, he didn't cry, he just remained silent. Because there are truths so great that when they finally arrive, they make no sound, they only crush. Sola stood up from the table without saying a word. He didn't look at his mother, didn't lift her from the floor, didn't tell her he forgave her, or that he hated her, or that he didn't know what to feel. He just stood up, grabbed the SUV keys that hung on a nail by the door, and left. Mama Bola didn't follow him. The SUV engine roared to life in the darkness. The lights illuminated the front of the house, the cracks, the broken mud brick, the wooden door his father made with his hands, and then drove away. Sola drove down the dust road, not knowing where to go. There was nowhere to go. To the right was the sleeping village, to the left, the scrubland. Ahead was the road that led to the highway, and the highway that led to Lagos, and Lagos that led to his apartment. He could leave right now, drive all night, reach his apartment, go back to work on Monday as if nothing had happened, keep sending money, keep calling every 2 weeks, keep not asking. He could do what he had done his whole life, run away. He stopped in the middle of nowhere, turned off the engine, got out. The sky of Yorubaland was there above, as always. Thousands of stars, the same sky he saw as a child lying in the yard, when his father was still alive, and the world made sense. He leaned against the SUV and cried. He cried like he hadn't cried since his father's funeral, with his mouth open, his shoulders shaking, with a raw sound that came from a place he didn't know existed. He cried out of rage, cried out of shame. He cried for the 9 years of lies, but also for the 9 years of silence. Because the lie wasn't just Mama Bola's, it was his too. He had chosen not to ask. He had chosen comfort. He had accepted that a 7-year-old woman had a daughter over the phone and hadn't asked a single question, because asking questions meant getting involved, and getting involved meant coming back, and coming back meant facing everything he had left behind. "How many times did I call and not ask?" he said aloud. To the stars. To no one. How many times could I have come back? He thought of Neka, of the night before he left, of the girl who looked at him with rage and said, "If you go, don't come back." And he left, and she was left with a child inside. He thought of Amara, of the drawings, of the man across the divide, of the phrase she said without looking at him, drawing with a worn blue crayon. "My mama says my papa left, but that someday he would come back. Someday he would come back." 8 years waiting for a man who didn't know he had to come back. And the child called him brother. She had shown him a drawing of him on the roof. She had fallen asleep in his arms on the way back from the cemetery. All that time, every time she looked at him, she was looking at her father and didn't know it, and neither did he. "Take good care of her, Mama." The phrase hit him again like a blow. His own voice, his own stupidity, talking about his daughter as if she were a stranger's little sister, asking for her to be cared for from afar, as if love could be outsourced. Sola slid down the side of the SUV until he was sitting on the earth. He stayed there, his back against the tire, looking at the sky, his face wet and his chest empty. He wasn't the older brother. He was the father who left, and the child had been waiting for him for 8 years. The sky began to change color when Sola started the SUV. He hadn't slept, hadn't decided anything with his head, but at some point during the night, sitting on the desert earth, something had stirred within him. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't clarity. It was something simpler and more difficult, the certainty that he couldn't leave again. He drove back slowly. The village began to appear in the gray light of dawn. First the church steeple, then the roofs, then the dust road that led to his mother's house. When he arrived, he saw something that stopped him. Amara was sitting at the door, alone, in her crumpled white nightgown, legs hugged to her chest, chin resting on her knees, barefoot on the cold earth, looking towards the road as if she had been waiting for hours. Sola got out of the SUV, walked towards her. His boots crunched on the dry earth. Amara watched him approach without moving. When he was in front of her, he stopped. "Are you leaving again?" Amara asked. The question hurt him more than everything his mother had told him in the kitchen. More than the certificate, more than the letter, more than the phrase on the phone. Because it wasn't a complaint, there was no anger. It was the question of a child who was already used to people leaving. Her mother left, her brother never came. And now that he had come, the child was already preparing for him to leave too. 8 years of life. And the only thing Amara knew for sure was that people leave. Sola knelt in front of her. The earth dampened his jeans with the morning dew. He looked into her eyes, the eyes he had seen in the mirror all his life. And he wanted to tell her. He wanted to tell her everything. "I'm your father. I'm not your brother. I'm your father, and I didn't know it, and forgive me for taking so long." But the words didn't come out, because saying that in that moment would have been for him, not for her. It would have been to alleviate his own guilt, not to care for a child who was just beginning to trust a man for the first time in her life. And Sola, who had spent 9 years making decisions thinking only of himself, for the first time thought of someone else. "I'm not leaving," he said 2 words, the most difficult he had ever said in his life, because they weren't an impulse, they weren't an emotion, they were a promise. And Sola, who had never kept a promise that wasn't a money transfer, knew this was the first one that truly mattered. Amara looked at him. She didn't hug him, didn't smile. She just looked at him with that clean gaze of children who want to believe but have learned not to do so quickly. Really? Truly? They remained like that, both of them at the door of the mud brick house, as the sun began to appear behind the hills and the village filled with light. Amara didn't hug him, but she didn't leave, and for now, that was enough. Sola entered the house and found Mama Bola in the kitchen. She was sitting in the same chair where she had told him the truth hours earlier. She hadn't moved. Her eyes were swollen, and her hands lay still on the table, as if awaiting a sentence. Sola sat opposite her. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The morning sun entered through the window, giving the kitchen a clean light that didn't match what had happened inside during the night. "I don't forgive you," Sola said. His voice was hoarse, worn. "I want you to know that. I don't forgive you yet." Mama Bola nodded. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She no longer had the strength to ask for anything. "But I understand why you did it." Mama Bola looked up. "I don't accept it," Sola continued. "I don't accept that you lied to me for 8 years. I don't accept that my daughter grew up not knowing who I am. I don't accept that you decided for me." Pause. "But I understand that you were afraid, and I understand that fear trapped you until you couldn't escape." Mama Bola brought a handkerchief to her eyes. Sola took a deep breath. He ran his hands over his face. "Now tell me about the illness. Everything, no lie." And this time Mama Bola didn't minimize. She told him what the doctor in Ogbomosho had told her 3 months ago. Her kidneys were functioning at less than half. She needed tests in Ibadan or Lagos, maybe dialysis, maybe something worse. Without treatment, the doctor had given her 1 or 2 years. Sola listened without interrupting. When his mother finished, he stared at the table for a while. "I'll take you," he said. "I'll take you wherever you need to go. And Amara comes with us. And your job in Lagos? The job can wait." Mama Bola looked at him, as if she didn't understand, as if she had been so accustomed to Sola being far away, that the idea of having him near didn't fit in her head. "There's something else," Sola said. "Amara, what about Amara? We have to tell her the truth." Mama Bola tensed. "Not yet, Sola. Let her get to know you first. Let her trust you as a brother, and then when she's ready." "Another lie, Mama." "Is that what you're asking me for? Another lie? It's not a lie, it's time. Time. How much time? Another year? Another 8? Mama Bola remained silent because the question was fair and she had no answer. Sola leaned back in his chair, looked out the window. Outside, the village was waking up. A rooster crowed. A distant door opened. The usual dry wind. "I'm going to tell her the truth," Sola said. And this time it wasn't a question or a proposal. It was a decision. "I don't know when, I don't know how, but I'm going to tell her. And this time, you won't be the one to decide when." Mama Bola looked at him, and in the midst of her pain and guilt and fear, something new appeared on her face, something that resembled relief, because for the first time in 8 years, someone else was carrying part of the weight, and for the first time in his life, her son wasn't running away. "All right," Mama Bola said. All right, my son. You decide." Sola nodded, got up, went for a glass of water, poured one for his mother. Both drank in silence. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't peace. It was something more modest and more real, an agreement between 2 broken people who decided to stop lying. And for now, that was enough. Days passed, not many, but enough for something to begin to change in that mud brick house with the broken roof. Sola didn't leave. He didn't talk about Lagos, didn't mention work, or the journey, or the shared apartment with 3 men. He got up early, had breakfast with Mama Bola, and climbed onto the roof. He bought new corrugated iron sheets in Ogbomosho, bought wood, bought nails that weren't rusty, and a hammer with a firm handle. And every morning he climbed the ladder and kept working. It wasn't just the roof he was fixing. It was something bigger than that. But he couldn't put that into words yet. Amara watched him every day a little closer. The first day from the corner of the yard, the second from the kitchen door, the third sitting at the foot of the ladder, and on the 4th day, standing right below where he worked, head raised, honey-colored eyes following every movement of his hands. "I'll help you," Amara said. Sola stopped hammering, looked down at her. The girl had her hair tied with a red band, bare feet covered in earth, and an expression on her face he was beginning to recognize. The face of someone who wants to be close, but doesn't yet know if she can. He smiled. "Come up." He lifted her carefully, holding her arms as she placed her feet on the ladder rungs. When she got to the top, Amara looked at the village from the roof, and her eyes widened. "You can see everything from here. Everything, even Lagos." Sola laughed, a short, soft laugh that hurt a little in his chest. "No, Lagos is too far. Are you going back there?" Sola looked at her. 8 years. 8 years of drawings with a man on the other side of a line. 8 years of waiting for a father who didn't know he had to come back. And now that child was sitting on a roof next to him, asking him if he was leaving again. "No, for now," he said. And it was the truth. Amara nodded, took a nail from the bag, and handed it to him. "I'll hold the sheets for you," she said, very serious, as if they were building a cathedral instead of a village roof. They worked together in silence. Sola put the sheets. Amara handed him the nails and held the wood with her small hands. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Sometimes the silence between two people says more than any confession in a kitchen at midnight. At one point, Amara said, "Brother, thank you for fixing the roof. When it rained, drops fell on my face, and Mama put buckets." Sola swallowed, tightened his grip on the hammer. "No more drops will fall now. Do you promise?" "I promise." Amara smiled. That small, shy smile, like a door opening 1 centimeter wider than yesterday. She called him brother. He didn't correct her. He knew he had time. He knew the truth would come when it had to come, not when he was ready, but when she was. And in the meantime, what he could do was this: be there, put sheets, pass nails, not leave. Inside the house, Mama Bola watched them from the kitchen window. She had one hand on her chest and the other resting on the frame. She was crying, but it wasn't the weeping of the previous nights. The crying of fear, of guilt, of secrets weighing more than the body. It was another kind of crying, one that came from the same place but went to a different one. It was relief, not forgiveness. Not yet, but something akin to it. The feeling that after 8 years of lying and hiding and carrying alone, someone else was there. Someone who hadn't forgiven, but who had stayed. And sometimes staying is the closest we get to forgiveness. Outside, the Yorubaland sun fell on the new roof, and on the wall of Amara's room, taped up next to all the others, there was a new drawing. The same house as always, the same old woman at the door. But the man was no longer on the other side of the line, no longer far away, no longer on the other side of the divide. He was on the roof, and beside him, for the first time, there was a little girl. This story doesn't have a happy ending. It has something better, an honest ending. Sola didn't arrive in the village and become the perfect father overnight. Mama Bola wasn't forgiven with a hug and a pretty phrase, and Amara didn't discover the truth sitting on that roof. What happened was smaller than that, and more real. A man who had spent 9 years running decided to stay. A mother who had spent 8 years lying decided to release the truth. And a child who drew a man far away began to draw him close. Sometimes that's all that can be done, not fix what's broken, just stop breaking it. And sometimes love doesn't come with the word papa. It comes with a nail, a hammer, and the promise that no more drops will fall when it rains. Now I ask you, who are listening to this, would you have done the same as Mama Bola? Would you have lied to protect your child, even knowing that the lie could destroy everything? Leave your answer in the comments, because this story doesn't have just one truth, and I want to know yours. If this story touched your heart, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it, because sometimes the stories that hurt the most are the ones that teach us the most. See you next time. Take good care of yourselves and your loved ones, especially those who are close, because distance is not measured in kilometers. It is measured in everything we fail to say in time.